Welcome back, everyone. It's the lawyer you know for our quick week 2 Ghislaine Maxwell update. I just got off the stream with Legal Mindset. If you haven't checked that out, it's kind of an overarching discussion of the Maxwell trial, comparing it to some of the other high-profile federal criminal trials that have come down against celebrities in the Me Too movement. So if you want to check that out, go to our page, check it out, and check out Legal Mindset's page. It was an interesting discussion. But for this video, it's more of what you have come to expect from our channel. We're going to quickly go through what happened week 2. And next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think there's going to be no court. I want to know from everybody out there, if you want me to get Big George on next week to do a week 3 breakdown, get his thoughts on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and these trials in general. He's handled a lot of these kind of trials as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer of people accused of these exact crimes. So, to recap what has gone on so far and how the evidence is coming across to the jury and the people in the courtroom, first we had an expert who discussed grooming of sexual victims. And she gave some elements of what these sexual abusers and their surrounding circles, which is Ghislaine Maxwell for Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, Ghislaine Maxwell, as I was so graciously corrected on the first video, and I will do my best to continue pronouncing it that way. The 5 elements are: first, selecting a victim; second, obtaining access to and isolating the victim; third, using lies and deception and manipulation to build trust and attachment; 4, desensitizing a victim to physical and sexual touching; and 5, maintaining control to coerce the victim into accepting continued abuse. And if you listen to the testimony of the victims so far in this case, it seems like that is spot on for what Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell did to these victims. And Ghislaine Maxwell played a big part in making them feel comfortable and making the touching and desensitizing them to this sexual activity at a young age, and even participating in and leading by example in some of the sexual activity with Jeffrey Epstein in this case. We also heard from Juan Alessi, a 71-year-old former house manager for Jeffrey Epstein, who worked for him for a ton of years and made a ton of money off of him. But he basically said everything changed when Ghislaine Maxwell showed up. She changed the rules. She said stuff like, you're not allowed to look Jeffrey Epstein in the eye. You're not allowed to speak directly to him. And there was this rule book that was 58 pages of house rules that were crazy and psycho and make you think of the R. Kelly case, where there were all these rules and things you could do and couldn't do, and how you had to treat Epstein or R. Kelly like your master when you were there, basically, which gives off the feeling of sex slaves and the issues that are being charged to these criminal defendants in this case, or Ghislaine Maxwell in this case. And he also talked about how they were told as workers in the house to see nothing, hear nothing, and do nothing, act deaf, blind, and dumb, because you are not allowed to get into their personal lives or talk about their personal lives, and you better not tell anybody what happens here, what you see that goes on in this house, or what you hear that goes on in this house, which is obviously damning to the people that were perpetrating these crimes in these houses. Some shots he got for the prosecution were that he saw lots of young women in the house. He met one of the victims that testified she was 14 or 15 years old when she would hang around the house a lot. But some shots the defense got. He never saw sexual activity, never knew that this was happening in the house around him, because if there was, he would have done something, of course. And that's what defense attorneys have to ask these witnesses. If you were there, the pilot and the house manager, if you were there this whole time and all this bad stuff was happening and you saw all these young girls, and if Epstein was such a bad guy and Ghislaine Maxwell was so bad at creating this sexually violent ring and this sexual abuse for all these young women, why didn't you do anything about it? Oh, you never actually saw it, you never actually experienced it, none of the victims told you about it? Well, maybe that's exactly what happened to Ghislaine Maxwell. She never saw it. She was never involved in it. Maybe it's that same exact thing that happened to you would happen to her. Now, big difference is the victims are all saying Ghislaine Maxwell was there. Ghislaine Maxwell was participating. Juan Alessi and all these other witnesses, like the pilot, they weren't there. They weren't participating. They didn't see it, but Ghislaine Maxwell did. So that is a big distinction. But if I'm a criminal defense lawyer in this case, I'm trying to make that parallel that all these witnesses that are now testifying to all these facts as if they knew, and these facts prove that sexual violence was happening in the house, yet they didn't know, to me, that's a point for the defense. And on cross, he was impeached with some inconsistent statements that he made in other depositions and kind of overall made to look like a shady character. But I think the house rules that it all changed when Ghislaine Maxwell came, and she was always there all the time in the massage room with the victims of sexual violence in this case was very damning for the defense overall from Juan Alessi. Then we had law enforcement testify to some of the things they found at the house. We saw the massage table, the sex toys, pictures of Jeffrey Epstein everywhere, and just the overall sexual nature of the house and what was happening. I would object to that as a criminal defense lawyer. Why is that relevant? The fact that there was a massage table there or sex toys does not prove sexual violence. And if they're trying to prove Jeffrey Epstein's sexual deviancy, again, that's not any action that Ghislaine Maxwell took. And I think that's problematic when you're talking about this is a criminal trial for Ghislaine Maxwell. Seems like her lawyers are welcoming it though, because they just want to point the finger at Jeffrey Epstein, and they're allowing all this deviant talk to be about Jeffrey Epstein and saying that's not Ghislaine Maxwell, that's Jeffrey Epstein. My strategy would have been to keep as much about Jeffrey Epstein out of this trial as I could, so that unlike the R. Kelly case, they would not have this generally bad guy thing that they have going on, where they're piling up all this negativity and horrible nature of all these actions that were done in this case by Maxwell and Epstein in order to make the jury think this is a menace to society. We cannot let her walk free. So then we had another accuser take the stand, and this was Kate. And this accuser was actually 17 at the time of the abuse, and the judge actually instructed the jury that none of the things she's going to testify to are in the criminal complaint because they are not technically criminal actions. They are not crimes because she was of age in the UK. Then why is she testifying? Why is this relevant? To me, this is cumulative. This is bolstering. This is way more prejudicial than it is probative. Meaning it's going to hurt the defense so much more just for her to testify to the sexual things that happened and the involvement of Ghislaine Maxwell when none of that was a crime, as opposed to what it's going to prove. Because it's not proving anything additional, in my opinion, to what the other victims are already testifying to. And if the other victims can testify to the crimes that were committed, then why are we allowing the testimony of non-criminal actions to come in of things between Jeffrey Epstein and this victim that also involved Ghislaine Maxwell? Now, the judge felt it was necessary to let him in, and we'll see if that ends up being an appellate issue. I would think that it would be. And later on, we find out that another victim was actually 16 in New Mexico for some of the things she testified to, and the judge is going to throw out those criminal causes of action. Very strange and unusual. This actually did happen to us in a federal criminal case that we tried and ended up winning, which was a Medicare fraud case. And the government came with all these counts and all these fraudulent charges against our client who was a doctor. And by the end of the case, almost every single fraudulent charge was whittled down, and it turned out it actually was not illegal the way the doctor did it. And the jury ended up acquitting the doctor on all the counts because the government was just wrong in how they brought these charges. And we were able to prove that throughout the course of the trial, and it seems like the defense is starting to prove that some of the ages of these victims and the locations of what happened maybe weren't criminal. Now, I'm still leaning heavily towards a conviction for Ghislaine Maxwell in this case because there still are multiple victims, and the jury is hearing from multiple victims, which always stacks the deck against the defense. But two of the victims now, the actions they're testifying to are not technically criminal. They may be perverse. We may not like them. We may not agree with them. We may not do them in our personal lives, but this is a federal criminal trial. And I think the testimony should stick to the crimes and the actions of Ghislaine Maxwell for which she should be criminally punished, if any exist, based on the evidence. So she testified to the grooming in the same MO of the sexual deviancy of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, which I think is just piling on because it wasn't technically criminal. But she even said she stayed in contact with them because she knew how well connected they were with the Clintons and the Trumps. She knew how powerful they were, so she didn't cross them. Strange to me, but there was also some testimony from some witnesses or some bank records that show that Ghislaine Maxwell made over $30 million from Jeffrey Epstein. Not a surprise. She got a lot of money from him. She was his girlfriend and employee and things like that. And then there was a help wanted sign for a massage therapist that they would pay well. All pointing to the fact of this basically criminal enterprise that Ghislaine Maxwell was heavily involved in to the tune of $30 million. Then we saw some photographs that showed how close Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein were, to show that they were always together for over 11 years. They were dating, they were business partners, whatever it may be. She was heavily involved every day, which is corroborating from some of the other witnesses that we heard. Next, we have some of the most explosive testimony, which was Carolyn, who was a victim that had a horrible childhood. She was abused. Her parents struggled with addiction. She struggled with addiction, criminal background. she was groomed and taken and abused hundreds of times by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. She basically said every time she gave a massage, it turned sexual, and Ghislaine Maxwell was basically always around and involved in all of this. She attributes the abuse to her addiction problems and her criminal problems, that she just could never cope with it. She would have to take drugs before she would go and hang out with Epstein. And it was just a horribly sad story. But on cross, her direct was basically an hour, cross was 4+ hours. They impeached her credibility over and over again. Inconsistent statements. How old was she when this happened? Where did it happen? Excruciating detail of exactly what happened, which we find out that it's really important what happened. As horrible as it is, certain things are illegal and certain things are not. So we can't hate criminal defense lawyers for going into detail in certain situations like this. And if you want a detailed breakdown of exactly what happened in this testimony, check out Joe at Good Logic. He's in the courtroom. He's breaking down step by step every fact that's happening. So I encourage you to jump over his page if you want a longer breakdown. He does a couple hours on this stuff to give you all the details. But it's excruciating. And the defense did a good job of poking holes in her testimony. But on redirect, the U.S. attorney got up and said, is all your testimony motivated by money? Is money going to take away what they did to you? Is money going to fix your problems? And came kind of hard at her, and she just broke down and basically explained again how this ruined her life and no amount of money is going to help her. And while I think that the assistant U.S. attorney did a great job of rehabbing her from all accounts and purposes from everybody that was in the room, I do think if I was a juror, one of the most damning parts of the cross-examination was she filed civil lawsuits back in 2007 and 2008. She was impeached with a lot of what was in those lawsuits, especially the fact that she sued Jeffrey Epstein and other assistants and people that worked for him, but not Ghislaine Maxwell. She did not name Ghislaine Maxwell in those civil complaints. That's damning to me, because all the things she's testifying to happened before 2007. So why not ever mention Ghislaine Maxwell if she was so intimately involved in the abuse? Why not sue her additionally? And she's gotten millions of dollars worth of settlements. And we know now that Ghislaine Maxwell was paid over $30 million from Jeffrey Epstein. Why not sue him? As a plaintiff's lawyer who represents victims in these kinds of cases, I know you sue everyone that wronged your client. You sue everyone that caused damage to your client, and you make them pay for the wrongs that they've committed and the damage they've done to your clients. So why wasn't she sued? And on redirect, again, the U.S. attorney did a good job of saying, did you write the complaint? Did you decide who to sue? Did you know what was going on? And it seems like this witness was of limited intellect, so it made sense and was a believable story that she didn't know. She kind of followed the lawyer's leads, which again indicates to me that she didn't tell the lawyers that Ghislaine Maxwell was involved, or the lawyers would have sued Ghislaine Maxwell. At least that's how I see it. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. And then we heard from her ex-boyfriend, which I think, in my opinion, I would have objected to bolstering and cumulative again, because he basically just corroborated everything Carolyn said. But you're allowed to do that sometimes when a witness is impeached, and you can call that additional witness to corroborate that testimony because she was impeached so bad by the defense attorney. So she testifies. The defense attorney basically calls her a liar with these other statements. So the prosecutor brings another witness that says, yes, I saw all of that. All of that was true. I experienced it. Ghislaine Maxwell called my phone with this British accent, and she did do all this stuff to my ex-girlfriend, Carolyn. So that was just some corroborating evidence. And we were also going to hear from another one of the victim's brothers, except that the prosecutor brought to the judge's attention that that victim went and called her brother, said some nasty words about the defense attorney, which happens sometimes on both sides in our cases. You'd be surprised what witnesses and parties say about we, the lawyers. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. But that witness was now disqualified from testifying because they violated the rule of sequestration. And the judge is not going to allow them to testify. The prosecutor basically said, we're not going to call him anymore because of this violation. Now, does anything happen to the victim for violating those rules because they were told not to talk to any other witnesses? I doubt it. But I do think it would be important if everybody had to play by the rules. It's horrible what happened to these victims. But people's lives are on the line here in criminal cases. So let's just play by the rules that are put out in front of us, because she can talk to her brother the whole time until the trial starts. And then once she testifies, until he's done testifying, she cannot talk to him about what happened in the case. And my guess is that was made clear to her. She violated those rules, and I get it. She's angry, and we understand. And the remedy is this brother cannot testify now. So maybe it hurts the prosecutor's case. So there is some kind of punishment to it, but I do think it's important that rules are abided by and everybody plays by the same rules. So I have not gotten an update today, Thursday, about what happened. You're going to be watching this Friday morning, so it'll be about a day behind. I apologize. We'll try to do another update next week. And because this is a heinous federal criminal trial, I want to know from everybody out there if you want me to get Big George on next week to do a week 3 breakdown, get his thoughts on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and these trials in general. He's handled a lot of these kind of trials as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer of people accused of these exact crimes. So if you want to hear from him and get into his mind a little bit about this case, drop a comment for Big George below and let me know, and I'll try to bring him on next week. But for now, that's all we've got. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll be back with you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.